I invested a full day of my life very wisely, exploring dungeons, forging my unique path through this dangerous fantasy world, building up my camp full of fascinating characters and cute ones too, and it all begins with Sphincter. Chapter 1, Sphincter. Hold on a second, close that sphincter. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Chapter -1. My eyeball gets violated. I selected Tactician difficulty. Give it to me tactical. I witnessed my fellow captive suffer the wrath of a translucent brain parasite, administered via the eyeball cavity of course, before old mate Noodleface here turned his psionic attention towards me. I tried to turn my head away, but the Mind Flayer force-slapped me into submission, and I witnessed a rather disturbing sight. That's right, this little guy's teeth are a disgrace. Go see a dentist, you grub. Also, I now have a tadpole in my brain. Chapter 0. Making myself handsome. After about 40 minutes of intensely studying the in-depth character creator, I found the answer. The way to make myself as handsome as possible. A majestic mustache. Look at that curl. Character created and handsomeness achieved. Chapter 1. Sphincter. As the big meaty Nautilus blimp I was captive in started causing a ruckus in Baldur's Gate, some of my kinsfolk, Githyanki dragon riders, came out of nowhere to fight. The Mind Flayer plucked this fleshy bass guitar and we teleported to somewhere frosty. And after an epic chase, this dragon managed to unleash its bad breath right on that pool of toothy tadpoles. But just then, the Mind Flayer plucked another bass note and we teleported into... Wait, where the hell are we? Hell. Where the hell? I think hell. The forces of hell are up to all kinds of shenanigans. Wait, what the hell? And then the mustache emerged. I acquainted myself with the interface. I took off my monastic robes for a second and discovered I was wearing very strange undies, and I got on the move. I claimed a topaz from this dead body. Take a topaz any day of the week, mate. I painstakingly explored the area because that's a must. You gotta check every nook and cranny and crevice and corner and sphincter. Sphincter? Good lord. Oh my lord. Whoa, 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 whoa. That is glorious. Look at that mustache. Yeah, baby. It's another Githyanki. She wanted to poke me with her sword, but the parasites in our brains did some psionic zoomies, revealing that we are now telepathically linked, and I made a bold prediction. I think we're destined to marry. We're both gifts. That is how I knew I was going to marry my wife in real life, actually. We were both humans at the time, and enough said. Lae'zel joined my party as we teamed up with a plan to take control of the ship and find a way to escape this hell and return to the material plane. But first, some imps to kill. Each character had some movement, one action, and one bonus action available to make use of per turn. Floydson, who is a monk by the way, used an action to whack this imp, and Lae'zel, who is a fighter, also one-hit an imp with a big swing of her two-handed sword. After dispatching the third imp, I looted absolutely everything in sight, and headed back the way I'd come because I wanted to see what was at the top of this elevator. It was a brain. An exposed brain was at the top. Anyway, time to climb some arterial mesh, and to pass through another sphincter. I discovered a young lady named Shadowheart, trapped. Lae'zel's response to this was full of compassion.
Don't waste time on Istik. We must go.
You are beautiful.
What the heck? This big brain on legs was giving the sphincter a workout as it ran back and forth. I grabbed this eldritch rune from the next room, and I witnessed a top-tier beauty transformation. I placed the rune I found in this console over here, and I was able to use my mind to command Shadowheart's pod to open. The parasite in my brain comes with psionic perks, apparently. Shadowheart hit me with some prejudiced remarks.
That's what your kind does. They take.
And she collected this strange artifact before joining the party. And then another sphincter. Up on the bridge of the Nautilus, it was popping off. And Tentacle Lips told me to get to the transponder so we could escape this literal hell. There were some hellsboars and imps in my way, so I took them out, and the Mind Flayer was fighting this impressive demon fella Commander Zulk, who was level 8. I soon worked out I wasn't really meant to kill this guy, so after missing him a couple of times I headed towards the transponder. And this is how I learned about opportunity attacks. If you walk away from an enemy in melee range, they will get an opportunity to whack you on the butt as you turn your back. And since this winged fella was 7 levels higher than me, he made me dead. On the reload, I ignored him and beelined for the transponder. And just as his ship was going down, I managed to grasp these two handshaking tendrils, and we teleported somewhere that wasn't hell at least, much to the surprise of the locals. I lovingly made eye contact with the Mind Flayer. Hey buddy. When out of nowhere, a piece of Nautilus steak bonked me on the noggin, and I fell to my inevitable doom, only to be saved at the last second by some mysterious force. What a mustache, man, honestly. Chapter 2, Old Man Withers. Now that I was back on solid ground, it was time to explore and to find my guy Withers. What a devilish fellow. So well spoken. Great jawline. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
The tadpole is a death sentence, and the clock is ticking. You need a cure.
As the dungeon master said, the thing in my head was destined to transform me into a mind flayer sometime in the next few days. So job number 1 was to find a way to get rid of it. I found Shadowheart having a snooze nearby, so I gave her a little wiggle and we joined forces once more to explore the area. I leveled up to level 2 first. Each character got some extra health. My guy Floydson the monk got some boost to his mobility and dodginess, and Shadowheart, who is a cleric by the way, got some new spells and spell slots. I assigned her mostly healing and defensive spells. I found a beautiful hat. Hell yeah. A most excellent hat, no doubt about it. I of course looted everything I laid eyes on, and soon I found my first waypoint, right next to this ancient door. I'd picked up some thieves' tools in my looting spree, so I attempted to pick the lock, but I need a roll of 20. I did have a few bonuses to my roll though. 1 from the lockpick, 3 from my dexterity stat, and +2 from my sleight of hand proficiency, learned in my childhood as a street urchin. And Shadowheart buffed me with the guidance spell, giving me a further bonus of 1 to 4. This will give me a chance, come on. I still need a higher roll though. Hey, yes, baby, we did it. By the way, you should know every single action in Dungeons & Dragons games like this succeeds or fails based on dice rolls just like that. From lockpicking to dialogue options to actions in combat. I found myself in a dank crypt, and this happened. Oh crap.
Too much to bear.
So I guess that chonky sarcophagus was booby-trapped. On the reload, one of my nerds actually perceived this, and I also spotted the gargoyle heads on the walls that had shot the fireballs. You can disarm traps, but I was yet to find a disarm kit, so I lit some candles in the next room for a while, which was very satisfying, before getting stuck at another locked door. I didn't have any more thieves' tools, and whacking the giant doors with my sword achieved nothing, so I headed back out and began exploring the crash site. I was devastated to find some angry brain dogs here, because they forced my hand and I had to put them down when all I wanted was to pet them. Look how satisfying my monk's unarmed slaps are though. The fight wasn't the easiest, with the brains unleashing some big zaps and claw swings. I used a couple of level 1 healing words to top up my health, and Shadowheart whipped out a firebolt cantrip too. What should have been a simple fight against 3 brains was already kind of spicy, so I had a feeling tactician difficulty was going to test my limited mental capacity. Alright, we go straight in for a short rest there. As you can see, the short rest healed half of each character's health, and it restored my monk's key points, which are a resource used to unleash the flurry of blows unarmed attack I'd grown fond of. It didn't restore Shadowheart's spell charges though. A long rest back at camp is required for that. There were bodies strewn about, victims of the crash, and while searching around on the western side of the crash site, I found this pasty fellow. He used the classic "look over there" trick on me, and prime dingus that I am, I fell for it. Although to be fair, I did enjoy seeing a frightened boar off in the direction he pointed. I don't think it was worth the knife to the neck, however.
Splendid.
Asterion and I soon settled our differences when we worked out we both had parasites in our brains, and we were better off working together. Better together. I leveled Asterion up, he's a rogue by the way, and we soon found an old friend.
You approach the dying Gake. The foul thing is at your mercy, and you would have its head.
He tried to fool me with his mind powers, enticing me to lean in as if for a kiss, but I decided not to do that, mainly because I wouldn't know where to start smooching with all them tentacles flopping everywhere. I did this instead. I think killing it is a mercy, to be honest. As much as that splash of water was disgusting. I scoured the map and realized I'd missed something back west, and when I got there I spooked the boar a second time, and across the water here I found a cheeky little box of goodies under a rock. It pays to be a thorough gremlin who insists on checking and double checking everywhere. I maintained this philosophy my whole playthrough by the way, and though I won't give you every last painful detail in this retelling, just know I was chatting up every NPC and looting every single item. Anyway, I discovered you can execute extremely impactful jumps. So you can do some very aggressive jumping. What is this? Ancient sigil circle.
A hand? Anyone?
Slap the hand. Strength. Alright, we need a 7 roll. We can do this. Come on. Oof. Just.
That's it! Go on!
Hi Gale, nice robe.
And I can only assume you too were on the receiving end of a rather unwelcome insertion in the ocular region.
That is one way to put it. This bloke has a way with words to rival even the great Floydson, so of course he had to join the party. I leveled him up immediately. He's a wizard, and wizards get to choose a subclass. I think I'm gonna go divination, so I can re-roll when I get a crappy roll. I learned 2 spells as well. One of them, magic missile, which took me right back to my childhood when this was my favorite spell in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Long live magic missile.
Zoro was right. Yellow as a toad, twice as ugly.
The thing's dangerous. Leave it for the goblins to kill.
I'm just gonna kill these guys. They're racist, bro. Gale whipped out the force lightning beam that Emperor Palpatine is fond of using to help us win this fight. And I shot out the bottom from Lae'zel's cage. She was very grateful.
The tadpole hasn't yet scrambled all your senses.
Auspicious.
I decided I wanted Lae'zel in the party, as I didn't have a chunky frontliner yet, so I sent Astarion back to camp.
Darling, I'm hurt. I thought we had something special.
Please just stay at the camp.
I leveled Lae'zel up. She got an action surge ability that lets her use an extra attack during a turn. Very juicy. And with my party of 4 brain-infected weirdos now complete, off I went. I found these ruins, and there were some scallywags loitering.
Shove. I don't even know if I wanted to fight these guys, but I'm fighting them now. So I couldn't resist pushing the nerd.
I made great use of sneak to execute that hilarious shove, and I brought the rest of the party out of stealth to unleash a bunch of surprise attacks on the group of treasure hunters. My approach to combat was simple, to focus down targets and reduce the enemy numbers as quickly as possible. I learned you need to be precise with your clicks in this game.
Oh, I just used it on nothing. What the hell?
Their wizard was popping off from the high ground, putting Floydson to sleep and shooting ice shards at Gale. And with this battle, I officially decided I love the combat of this game.
That's the second time that guy's gotten pushed down.
This proved a manageable fight, but I still had to use multiple heals. Lae'zel's second wind self-heal and a potion on Gale. And by the end of it, my party had no spell or ability points left, so it was time for my first long rest. To my surprise, this took me to a literal camp where I could interact with party members and store stuff. I had to use 80 camp supplies, a bunch of food I'd picked up in my travels so far, and that meant we had a hearty meal and got a proper rest, fully restoring all health and abilities. I picked the lock on this hatch and found myself back in the dank crypt, and I could smell the old man Withers in the air. He was close. Right behind this button, in fact. But these crusty nerds didn't want me getting to Withers, so they had to die. They were spread out, so I just held my party in place and waited for them to filter in one by one, which turned out to be a solid strategy. I also summoned this mage hand and used it to throw a candle at this skelly. It achieved nothing, but it was pleasing nonetheless. Look how much damage Big Floydson did to this fella. What a unit. After cleaning up that battle, I headed into Withers' resplendent chamber and found my first blue item, a necklace that lets you speak to the dead.
Oh, there's a friend in there. Good lord.
The infinitely wise Withers asked me, what is the worth of a single mortal life?
We are all equal, let's say that.
In death, that is so. Very well. I am satisfied. We will see each other again at the proper time and place.
We will?
Withers then potted around like an absolute legend, whinging about the disrepair of the place.
These chambers are much changed.
These chambers are much changed.
Chapter 3. Snake threatens to lick child. Tensions are high in the Emerald Grove, and it's up to our band of heroes to ease those tensions and ensure no horned children suffer violence. Also, look at this sleepy bear named Tuffet. Before heading to the Emerald Grove, I disarmed that trap on the sarcophagus from earlier and claimed some loot. And I used stealth and line of sight to my advantage to take out another 5 treasure hunters. Although my line of sight efforts didn't end up being too effective. After killing one last goose, I stole a great volume of cheese from this table. And as the 5th hour of this playthrough began, I started poking around the Emerald Grove environs. By the way, I have a feeling I am relatively slow progressing through this game. Probably very slow. And I'd like to give you an impressive reason for that, but I've concluded that it's simply because I am slow. Anyway, as you can see, some cheeky goblins were attacking in the Emerald Grove. This fight was chaos, with heaps of enemies but also some allies involved. It was pretty easy as a result, as my party didn't take too much heat.
Gloves of power.
I gave those to Floydson. They have a chance to debuff enemies' attack and defense, and they give a boost to sleight of hand. Also, one of my allies sadly died in the fray.
I feel bad, I let Ramiro die. Sorry, Ramiro. Alright, let's level up. See what we got.
Without getting bogged down in the details, Floydson and Lae'zel picked up intriguing subclasses that began fleshing out their combat options. Floydson got some elemental skills, and Lae'zel some battlemaster maneuvers. And Shadowheart and Gale learned some level 2 spells. I kept the clerics mostly restorative and defensive, and the wizards mostly offensive and utility focused. Instead of walking in the front gate of the Emerald Grove like a normal person, I randomly wandered off and spied this sneaky entrance into an underground passage where this happened.
Glowing eyes are rarely a good sign.
What a rude bird. I discovered you can upcast lower level spells. So I cast Healing Word, which is usually a level 1 spell, as a level 2 spell, so it would restore more health. I did a silly willy run, suffering the heat of the eagle's eyeballs, and deactivated the eagle rune nearby to calm down the angry bird statue. And I'd used up my 2 short rests, so it was time for my second long rest.
What's going on here?
Gale is no doubt a good-looking rooster. I then made a most glorious discovery.
Withers is here. What the heck are you doing here, Withers?
We meet again. As predicted.
When Withers told me earlier that we would meet again, I was expecting that to be much later in the game and in epic fashion. But nope, he just immediately showed up at my camp. What a legend. Withers provides resurrection, hiling, and class-changing services. While we slept, Asterion was doing some of these ones. Questionable behavior. Evidently, some sneaky goblins had found this passage too, and I suppose they were trying to find a way into the Emerald Grove. I whipped out my new water whip move to show them who's boss.
What a beast.
And look how satisfying magic missile is. I'd shuffled Shadowheart's spells around a little, so she now had Guiding Bolt, a radiant damage offensive spell. It turns out it's pretty strong.
Oh, good lord.
Sometimes when an ally is down, you can simply help them up. That is if they don't burn to death in the meantime. I had to use a scroll of Revivify to get Big Floydson back in the land of the living, but you've got to admit that was a pretty effective way to disarm a trap. I got an item that was pretty useless for my troubles. I found a back entrance to the Emerald Grove where a smelly goblin prisoner was caged. I chose to leave her be, and I found another sneaky entrance but ultimately chose to wander back over to the main entrance and entered the grove in respectful fashion. But first, a mysterious exsanguinated boar with no visible wounds. I had to Google the word exsanguinated. It means dead due to blood loss. But how could a boar die of blood loss without any visible wounds? Very mysterious. I also scrambled up some rocks and a ladder, and I shoved my hand in this spidery hole just to recover a whopping 13 gold coins. Huge loot. And then I disturbed the nest anyway because I wanted to kill the spiders for the experience points. And they gave me 3 experience each. Absolutely huge gains, no one can deny. I returned to the Emerald Grove's main gate and marveled at the sheer volume of blood left over from the carnage earlier. And then I enjoyed all the goodness the grove had to offer. I had some nice chats. I saved this astronomer from a bugbear assassin, making use of my new Fangs of the Fire Snake move. Very cool. And I had a look through her telescope.
What? Is it a dragon?
This squirrel tried to nibble on my big toe, so I did this. I witnessed some druid ritual going on in the heart of the grove below. I sold all the crap I'd been hoarding to Aaron the halfling, and bought gloves of missile snaring, which allows the wearer to intercept missiles. I failed to discern why this strange ox made me feel uneasy. I was pickpocketed by a little gremlin, and when I tried to give chase, I was thwarted by my largeness as the kid had fled into a small hole. I sadly would not fit in the small hole. When I revisited where the goblin was held captive using the front door this time, there were some angry folk looking for vengeance. I chose to protect the prisoner, because while I am a big fan of punting squirrels, I do draw the line at war crimes. Also, because vengeance eats people alive, you'll grant the goblins 2 victories today. Gale was impressed by my noble act, and was inspired to waffle some nonsense.
In any case, out came the crossbow, and a hush fell over the entire room. I stood up and yelled, "Shadow Dark Ale for everyone!" The crowd cheered!
Gale, you're talking at your butthole, mate.
I bought a greatsword and a bow for Lae'zel. The greatsword in particular was a solid 3 damage better than her previous weapon.
And that's a massive upgrade, you know.
I met a warlock named Will, and promptly discovered he too was infected with a parasite. Via our connection, I learned he'd been chasing someone through hell.
Will chases the fiend ignited with rancor. She is an infernal war devil.
I sent him to camp for now, as I was happy with my current party setup. Through this big stone door, I found Zevlor, leader of the tiefling refugees in the Emerald Grove, and he gave me some insight into their situation.
There have been several attacks by different monsters. The druids blame us outsiders for drawing them here. They've started a ritual to cut the grove off from the world outside.
The refugees were being forced to leave, but if they did, they'd undoubtedly be slaughtered by the goblins. They had no good options. I agreed to have a chat with acting first druid Korga on the tieflings' behalf. On my way to do just that, there was more drama.
Let my daughter go right now!
She's a thief, hellspawn, and you will wait for Korga's judgment. Now get back!
This is that girl with the snake's mother, but these druids are having none of it. Old mate even went hungry bear form. Fortunately, I was in the good books after helping to save the grove from that goblin attack earlier, so I got a free pass. I successfully rolled to gently nudge Tuffet's flank, which is just as well, because if I failed, I think Tuffet would have found me delicious. But thankfully, he sleepily moved out of the way.
Off your hop, big fella.
Now the lift was available to use, except I didn't actually need to use it, so I'm not sure why I interrupted Tuffet's slumber. Sorry Tuffet, I love you. I met this silly sausage Volo, who was quite the tale teller. He immediately began embellishing the legend surrounding the great Floydson, so I was actually a big fan. He said he was about to head off to hang out with the goblins, which I thought was a terrible plan, because with an outfit like that I suspected the goblins might bully him a little. But he seemed confident, so fair play I guess. And then...
Snake.
Please. I'm sorry.
I used extreme diplomacy to convince Korga to let the kid go.
Your snake is prepared to kill this child. Do you want her death on your hands?
Fair words.
Gale was once again a big fan of my noble efforts, and he decided he trusted me enough to confess something.
I have this condition.
Oh, he's got a condition.
Very different from the parasite we share, but
Herpes.
just as deadly.
He said he needs to absorb a magical item regularly in order to deal with this condition. So I doubt it was herpes, but you gotta give me props. That was a good guess. Gale asked if I might help him by giving him some magical items to munch on when the need arises. I spoke to Korga about showing mercy to Zevlor and the Tiefling refugees, and she said, nope, counter offer, you go provide bodyguard services for them so they'll feel more comfortable leaving. Deeper in the Druid's chambers, we tracked down Nettie, who is supposedly a talented healer. She did a great job with this bird, but her strategy for healing us was to stab us with a poisonous thorn. See, her medical opinion was that someone infected with a Mind Flayer parasite should be put down immediately. But then she had to admit we were slow to change. Other than our strange psionic powers, we were perfectly normal, when usually we'd be in a terrible state by now. And so she let us go, but made us promise to ingest poison should we feel ourselves being morphed into monsters. I told Zevlor of Korga's suggestion that we protect them on the road, and he said, no, counteroffer. How about you go and kill all of the Goblin leaders, which will break the spine of the Goblin outfit and make the roads safe for travel. You know what? That is a great plan. Chapter 4. Scratch, the Yawning book, and other novelties that distracted me on the way to murder some boss goblins. One novel thing that I discovered was that an entire religion had formed around people like us. Parasite-infected weirdos with psionic powers were considered true souls.
A true soul, like you, has been chosen by the Absolute. The true souls, you will rule.
I don't know about all that, but for now I used my authority over these two gooses to tell this bloke to embrace the baldness and shave off the nonsense on the side of his head. I had an opportunity to absorb the parasite from this dead dwarf, but I forced my mind shut from the illithid influence because it didn't seem wise to lean into it. I found a nearby cave. There was a statue of Selûne here, the moon goddess, and Shadowheart immediately expressed her hatred for Selûne and admitted she was a devotee of Shar, mistress of the night. In response, I said, fair enough.
Well, the cub. I don't want to kill the cub.
Don't worry, I didn't kill the cub. A fire snake plus unarmed strikes combo from Floydson, a big menacing strike from Lae'zel, except the owlbear rolled high enough to defend from being frightened. So I used Gale's portent die that he gets from the divination subclass to lower her saving throw roll to 6, which meant she failed that saving throw and was frightened. Yeah, Dungeons & Dragons rules are kind of complicated, so if you are confused, fair enough. Basically, the owlbear was having a rough time of it. Being frightened meant she now had a disadvantage on her attacks. Some magic missiles from Gale, which honestly did pretty crappy damage compared to the melee duo, and Bless from Shadowheart to buff up everyone's attack and defense. And then it was Mama Owlbear's turn.
What did you do?
Now enraged, she slapped Floydson, but thanks to the rally buff, he took it like a champ. Floydson had 0 ki left, so I couldn't use any of my good moves, and I'd used up Lae'zel's bonus attack last turn. Also, I think the owlbear's enraged state made her more durable, because the fighter's attack only did 8 damage. Another piddly magic missile barrage from Gale, a heal on Floydson from Shadowheart, and...
Oh, good lord.
Floydson just got cleaned up. Fortunately, the owlbear was low, so the rest of the party were able to finish her off.
Oh, so sad.
A single strike will end his suffering.
Let the creature live.
You watch, speechless, as the cub begins to eat his mother.
Well, I felt bad there for a second, but after that turn of events, I wasn't quite sure how to feel. Lae'zel helped Floydson up. He wasn't dead, just downed, and I explored the rest of the cave before heading back to camp for another long rest. And that night, some more questionable behavior from the rogue. You'd be forgiven for assuming Asterion was trying to get a close look at my glorious moustache, but he's actually a thirsty vampire.
Can't believe I didn't see it. We even found the ball you snacked on. I don't care how much you need. You're not drinking my blood.
In the morning, Asterion apologized again and clarified he's not a true vampire, just a vampire spawn. I chose to trust the pasty fellow.
Word of warning, Astarion. I taste absolutely awful.
As I continued exploring the wilderness, I stumbled upon this dog. I drank a potion of animal speaking and headed in for a chat. I think his master had seen better days, so I invited him to come with me.
No, I won't leave him.
Ah, loyal Scratch, what a good boy. I told him he should follow us to camp if his master doesn't wake up, which his master definitely won't wake up. I then found 2 brothers harassing an old lady, so I of course joined in.
You were supposed to rush to my defense, love. Fat lot of good you are.
She spontaneously disappeared, so the brothers claimed that she was an evil hag suddenly seemed credible. Apparently the hag had beguiled their sister by tricking her into believing old lady magic could bring back her late husband from the dead. The brothers ran off into the nearby wetlands to try and track down the hag, and I had a poke around down there too, but there are a bunch of traps in the water, one of which I triggered, so I lost confidence and decided I'd come back to see about the hag later. I backtracked and headed into the ransacked town of Moonhaven, heavily infested with smelly goblins and bugbears. I began clearing them out, and this particular fight involved some rooftop shenanigans, so that was fun. And the sharpshooter over on that rooftop over there absolutely popped off when he shot a fire arrow at an explosive barrel and roasty toasty 3 of my party members. A couple of prayers of healing from Shadowheart topped everyone up, and I continued poking around. After picking the lock of these shabby wooden doors, I discovered there was a fair bit going on down here below the town, including a giant spider-infested cave, the Whispering Depths. I took on some phase spiders and ettercaps. These spiders could indeed phase about, teleporting at will.
Oh, good lord.
It was dicey there for a second, but I popped a few healing potions to stay alive, and once the phase spiders were down, it was easy to pick off the ettercaps, because the silly monsters were stuck on the low ground, so they were helpless as I shot down at them. Once again, I'd used up all my melee party members' ability points, and my caster's spell charges, so back to camp we went for another feed and snooze. In the morning, a beautiful thing happened.
Scratch is here. Absolutely glorious. Scratch. I love you, Scratch.
As I explored and looted the Whispering Depths, my party kept getting snared by these spiders' webs, but over in this abandoned camp, I found the spider step boots, which make the wearer immune to being enwebbed, a timely find. I fastidiously searched and even shot down all the spiders' cocoons, so I could loot all the spiders' victims had to offer. This was the first ring I'd ever found, with a great utility power, meaning if the wearer falls below 50% health, they gain additional movement speed. And then I spotted the matriarch. She was level 5, and chunky with a whopping 162 health. And there were a couple of level 3 phase spiders with her, so I noped on out of there. I figured I'd come back with some bug spray. I found another basement connected to the cave. I worked these bellows, I found some fancy blacksmith blueprints in this chest I lockpicked, and I emerged back out to the village, where I took out a few more goblins and looted up a storm. And in the cellar of this fine establishment, a bunch of coffins. I think this agile guardian was trying to let his bro out to help, but all he got was an aggressive coffin flap situation. I'm not sure what happened there. It happened again over here. Coffin flap. I looted each coffin one by one, killing the disgruntled undead occupants of said coffins as I went. And then...
I'm Floydson.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who hath the most glorious moustache of them all? The mirror asked me a few questions that I somehow managed to answer to its satisfaction, so we gained entry to this weird laboratory type situation.
Ooh.
+2 armor class as long as you are not wearing armor. These gloves are perfect for a monk because monks do not wear armor. And after repeatedly failing and then finally succeeding to disarm this pressure trap, the Yawning book.
You try to examine the book, but the longer you stare, the more those piercing amethyst eyes draw you in.
Well, I guess I'll just hang on to it for now.
Until I can find something to put in the gaping mouth.
Oh. Wait, what? The start of combat, the wearer gains momentum for 3 turns. Momentum is 1.5 extra movement speed. That's very good.
The village of Moonhaven was certainly treating me well.
What's going on up here?
They had a gnome named Barkus Root tied to the windmill. That's what. I approached from another angle and found myself in combat with 10 enemies. I sent Floydson up to take out the archer on the high ground. Lae'zel came in clutch, knocking this warg prone, so he lost his first turn, and she one-hit this nerd too. Gale and Shadowheart had lower initiative stats, and in this particular fight it meant 4 enemies had turns before them, and they unleashed some decent damage, almost killing Gale. But when I used a guiding bolt and magic missile barrage to take down Fezerk, the goblin boss, the 7 remaining Dinguses ran off, which was great news because I think I would have been in trouble otherwise. I hit the brake on the windmill.
Cut me loose!
Mr. Root told me he was searching for a friend, so off he went to continue his search. He left me some loot as thanks. And for the last novelty of this chapter in our story.
Tastes like chicken. No chicken. Tastes like fish. Contain yourselves. This quarrel sours our feast. Besides, tastes like pork.
I told my guy Lump the Enlightened he was quite eloquent for an ogre, and he said,
Am I not astonishing?
No arguments here. We enjoyed a lengthy exchange, during which Lump insisted I looked quite delicious, and I disagreed, although I conceded that if he was referring to my moustache specifically, he had a point. Eventually we agreed that the next time I was in a big scrap, I'd call on Lump and his 2 distinguished friends, and in exchange for their help, they'd get to eat all of the victims.
Ogre kill everyone around, then Ogre eats them. Well spoken.
Lump gave me a horn to blow on to summon them when the time came, and promised they'd heed the call.
I got Lump's war horn.
Chapter 5. Spelunking.
Oh, there's hopscotch on the floor here. I can't jump that short.
I powered on despite my hopscotch inadequacy, because there was more to do before I would be ready to spelunk. After fast traveling back to the Emerald Grove to sell all the crap I'd accumulated, rinsing both vendors of all their gold in the process, I gave Scratch a pat, had a snooze, and as I continued exploring, Gale got hungry. The time had come for me to donate a magical item to him. I gave him this axe I didn't need anymore, and he did one of these ones.
That That hit the spot.
He declined to tell me what the hell this nonsense was all about, so I had to trust him for now, and consider the used up magical items a worthwhile cost for his wizardry. I headed to explore northward, and out of nowhere...
The mouse smiled brightly. It outfoxed the cat.
What? You can't just teleport me to wherever.
To be fair though, wherever here is looking quite fancy. This guy Raph is a devil, and he had a proposition. My soul in exchange for help getting rid of the parasite in my brain.
You're mad if you think I'll make a deal with the devil.
He promised he'd be watching, so I guess if all else fails, I can always sell my soul to Big Raph, and he'll help us out with a cure.
Alright, well, that was dramatic.
I then entered a most ill-fated barn, and I try my best to keep this channel relatively family-friendly, so let's just say I stumbled upon a couple of friends playing leapfrog. They did not appreciate the intrusion.
Oh, smash you!
I targeted the little fella first, as he had significantly less health to burn through compared to the big girl. He was dead before he got a chance to do anything, and we took her out too without too much drama. With great athleticism, we jumped the gap in this bridge, and up the hill I had my first encounter with some gnolls. These guys were level 4, so I was perhaps a little out of my depth as my party was still level 3, but I had the jump on them with some stealth, so I gave it a crack. I took out 2 immediately, and just as well because old mate proceeded to absolutely destroy poor Gale.
He's strong, you know.
I used Fist of Unbroken Air for the first time, which did big damage, sent him flying, and left him prone, so that was fun. And Lae'zel unleashed some big hits to finish off the fight. I helped my guy Gale back to his feet, and joy of joys, I'd finally hit level 4. And with these level ups, there were some important decisions to be made, so I spent literally half an hour deliberating. Gale and Shadowheart had new spells to learn, but the time-consuming part was choosing feats for all 4 of them. For Floydson, I picked Savage Attacker.
That means I hit higher more often.
Although watching back, I've just realized this only applies to weapon attacks, and a lot of what I do is unarmed, so this was actually a pretty crap choice. Damn it. I chose Ability Improvement for Gale, and assigned 2 more points of intelligence, which helped wizards learn their spells, and I chose the same for Shadowheart and Lae'zel, but gave them Wisdom and Strength respectively, as these are the Cleric and Fighter main stats. Down the hill were a bunch of hyenas having a bad day. They were in the process of turning into gnolls, apparently. Most of them transformed, but it used up their first turn, so it gave me a chance to dish out damage. And emboldened by my ascent to level 4, I headed back to the Spider Mum, but before engaging, a long rest.
Who is that?
She's Mystra.
Mystra is the goddess of magic, to whom Gale is quite devoted. He invited me to connect to the weave, and so I did some elite crocodile jaw slaps and actually made a connection. And after those silly willies, it was time for a fight. Big Mama hatched a bunch of spiderlings, so that immediately tipped the odds against us, and she dealt some solid damage too. I managed to take out both phase spiders, but when more eggs were hatched, I began doubting my chances. I had Lae'zel on cleanup duty trying to reduce mini spider numbers so I didn't take too much damage from them, and I managed to whittle down the matriarch's health, but I sustained casualties soon enough as there were little nerds absolutely everywhere. And though I fought to the bitter end with Gale as the last man standing, I only managed to get her down to 26 health. I almost just gave up at this point, but I wanted to see if some stealthy shenanigans would win me the advantage needed to take out the big girl. Typically, I would rather stay on the high ground, but in this case my only chance of being sneaky was to get down to the lower area where the phase spiders were chilling. And I had a great start. This spider was dead before it had a chance to do anything, and I began destroying these nearby eggs before the boss got a chance to hatch them. She hatched these ones up top though, but I managed to clean up the second phase spider before it could achieve anything too. And then I had my first bright idea. I suddenly wondered, do I have any potions of poison resistance? And sure enough, Floydson was smuggling a couple. I had him drink one, and this granted him resistance to poison damage, which halves incoming poison hits, and it meant he could no longer be poisoned, which is a status effect that gives a disadvantage to both your attacks and saving throws. Here's a quick Dungeons and Dragons lesson. Advantage means 2 dice are rolled instead of 1, and the higher roll is chosen for the action. Disadvantage means the opposite. So being immune to poison was indeed a huge deal for both attack and defense. The spiderlings made their way down, but I managed to take them all out fairly quickly, and I popped a poison resistance potion on Lae'zel too, so now my frontliners were capable of lasting at least twice as long in this fight. And then I had my second bright idea. I'd noticed these web bridges had 4 health earlier, but hadn't thought much of it. But now that Mama Spider had phased back up onto one, I wondered if destroying it would cause her to fall and take damage.
That actually did 37 damage. Holy crap, I'm a genius.
She was dumb enough to phase back up onto this web bridge.
Holy crap, that did 57 damage.
Suddenly, she was down to 27 health, and my entire party had barely taken a scratch. I got her health down to 5 before she had another turn, and just as well because she went Angry Mama mode, unleashing Spider Queen's Wrath and almost deleting Floydson using Venomous Bite, which deals piercing damage, so the potion he chugged wasn't much help. But then her turn was over, and Shadowheart was able to deal the killing blow.
Yes. Yes.
Over here I found a dark amethyst, which actually goes into that Yawning book's mouth hole, except I forgot to actually put it in there for ages. And it was time to spelunk. I know the Underdark is a thing in the Dungeons and Dragons world, and at this point I knew it was featured in the game, but I wasn't sure how to get there. I'd assumed you'd get down there in a way more normal than just jumping into a chasm, but when I saw the chasm, I had to try.
She died. So that's not ideal. But I just found the Underdark. Holy crap. And there's level 4 Minotaurs around. Very cool. I need to load though, because that was not an ideal maneuver.
On the reload, I used one of the 6 Featherfall scrolls I'd picked up in my travels, and
here we go.
The descent was much more graceful this time, like a feather falling, and thankfully involved no fragile body slapping onto hard rock. This Minotaur spotted my party, so suddenly I was in a fight with 2 117 health giant bull boys. Lae'zel performed a glorious jump using a spell that triples jump distance, and by the time it was the Minotaur's turn, we dished out a good amount of damage, and luckily his first wild swing missed.
What a beast.
Fortunately, the second Minotaur's turn was used up doing that majestic jump, so I had another round of free damage to dish out. And the first bull had used Reckless Roar, meaning my attacks now had advantage against him. And so he got slapped silly by Floydson and finished off by an arrow from Shadowheart. And then there was one.
What a beast.
That's the second time I've said that, and you've got to admit the big boy earned it. What a beast indeed. Shadowheart was totally out of spells, so I wasn't able to use her heals, but I did get her to throw a potion at Lae'zel to heal a little health. I dished out good damage too, but the Minotaur had one more turn in him, during which he downed Floydson, and he closed the gap on my squishy nerds with another majestic jump. But with only 23 health left, he died before he had a chance to unleash any more devastating blows. I helped Floydson up, and although the Underdark had me very much intrigued, I decided after that eventful spelunk it was time to actually get on with murdering some goblin bosses. Chapter 6. Save Scumming in the Goblin's Domain. It was time to finally head west into the heart of Goblin territory. After a long sleep, we snuck by this group defending the gate and headed into this tunnel where absolutely nothing exciting happened, and I definitely didn't reload to avoid those traps. Eventually I made it through, but I decided I wanted to kill these idiots anyway, so I have no idea why I bothered with all the sneaking around. This bloke had a go at me, but I used my Illithid influence to tell him we had every right to be here, so I was able to position my party exactly how I wanted before I started swinging. I exploded this trio of goblins, and as I headed towards this mountain pass, something very strange happened.
Hear my voice. Obey my command.
This powerful voice wanted me to help these 3 figures in the search for some mysterious weapon, and if I obeyed, it promised I would become one of the chosen too. But then another power surged from that Githyanki artifact Shadowheart had with her back at the very start of the game, and it repelled the voice. I have no idea what that was all about, but clearly there were at least 2 powerful forces at play vying for my attention.
So that was weird.
I clicked on the entrance to the mountain pass, but the game warned me I was too low level, so I left that alone for now and headed back to the Goblin camp. I chose not to head straight across the bridge, and instead did some extremely impressive jumps across here. I headed up this ladder and shanked this goblin who was doing a wee off the cliff, and then I realized something.
Oh, so these guys aren't enemies. I didn't need to sneak around.
Apparently they hadn't heard I'd been slaughtering their mates all over the countryside, so I was able to wander around the goblin camp freely. I found quite a good shield that Shadowheart equipped, and then I abruptly remembered I had the dark amethyst for the Yawning book. Now, this book is definitely cursed, so I definitely wanted to read it. I had to get increasingly difficult wisdom saving throws to continue turning the pages, and on the 20 difficulty roll, I failed the first time, but I had a re-roll handy, so I used it and successfully bound the book to me.
You see time rewritten, fate undone, your future thrumming with power.
When I tried to read more, it said the glyphs were indecipherable without a key, so I assumed I would find some such key in the future so that I could get myself even more thoroughly cursed. I had a chat with Piddle, and this is when everything went awry and my true save scummery began. Piddle here had stolen a book from my guy Volo. Remember Volo? This fella. So I guess Volo did indeed arrive to visit the goblins, and considering his book got stolen, I gather it didn't go too well for him. In any case, for some reason I decided I wanted this Piddle bloke to give me Volo's book, but Piddle isn't so easily intimidated.
I think I just angered the whole place.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Well, that ain't the play, man.
Unfortunately, I forgot to save after the silly willies with the Yawning book, so I had to do that again, but the rolls kept going against me. I had to reload 6 times to recreate what I'd achieved the very first time interacting with the cursed book, but finally the rolls went in my favor.
Yes! Alright, save. For the love of all that is good.
I ran into this absolute goober.
Bottoms up, hey! These little lads snagged some pretty decent drink.
I noticed you still haven't shaved your hair, mate. Over here, my guy Volo was being bullied into performing, except he lost the plot when I showed up and got escorted deeper into the camp to be imprisoned. I sold a bunch of crap to this goblin trader and bought 3 decent utility items from him. Some gloves to grant bow proficiency and +2 ranged damage, some boots that cause heals to give a +3 to health, and boots that increase jump distance. I made a wager for 300 coins to chase this chicken around, except it wasn't a chicken, it was the baby owlbear. In any case, I had no idea what the hell was going on, so I failed and lost 300 gold. This buffhead gave me some lip, so I humbled him, and then humbled him some more by making him kiss my boot. And after a great time hanging out with all those goblins, I finally entered the Shattered Sanctum. Chapter 7, Furious Bear. Apparently Gale needed to get his energy levels up if we were going to rescue that bear, so he munched on another magical item before we took on the welcome party of this rundown temple. Because my gallivanting around the countryside had got the party up to level 4, most of the fights in this place were relatively easy, as I suspect the expected level for this area is probably around level 3. Certainly this first melee was pretty straightforward. I had a long sleep at this point, and Lae'zel got a little frisky. Both she and I finally began presenting symptoms of ceremorphosis. The parasite in our brains appeared to be finally taking its toll. She wanted to kill us before we transformed. I managed to talk her down, claiming it was just food poisoning from the leftover butter chicken we had a few days ago.
I came just in time. You are transforming.
So I was too slow, and now I'm transforming?
I had spent a long time doing literally everything except finding a way to cure our brain parasites, so no real surprises here. It turns out this random dream lady is the one who rescued me and those 2 stakes from falling to our deaths when the ship crashed. And she was back to save me and my pals again. She would not let us turn into mind flayers.
I will keep it from consuming you, but for the sake of both of us, you must learn to wield it.
Dude, where am I? It's a floating neon skull.
I have to go. The enemy is closing in.
So the word from this random lady is that I should lean into the illithid influence in my brain. Before leaving camp, I played fetch with Scratch. I had a chat with this fine young lady, Priestess Gut. She's one of the 3 goblin bosses, and even though I was intent on killing her, for now I let her believe I wanted her help with the parasite in my brain. She told me to meet her in her chambers. I found Volo, and even though I had no reason to trust the random dream lady, I decided to anyway, using my illithid powers to psionically convince this guard to let us free Volo.
Look at this! I'm quite safe!
I told Volo to meet me back at camp. I then found this sinister fellow, Abdurak. I have no idea what he was doing in the goblin camp, but he told me his goddess Leviatha was a big fan of pain, and she'd give me a blessing if I let him whip me. So I let him whip me.
The pain you suffer will cleanse you. Do not fight it.
It was weird. Also, I didn't even get the blessing, because apparently I responded to the pain incorrectly. Anyway, let's move on. Next door, Torturer Spike was beating on this gentleman, but his only crime was having ginger hair, and that didn't sit right with me, so I freed him. I saw a realistic recreation of the This Is Sparta scene from 300. And over here, I randomly found a vendor, and when I saw this blooded great axe for sale, I said,
yeah, I do want this.
It cost over 1,000 gold, but it was another juicy upgrade for Lae'zel.
Attack.
Priestess Gut was isolated, so she got cleaned up before she could lift a finger. 1 out of 3 goblin bosses down. I claimed the parasite from her brain.
This one is a true soul parasite. It can enhance you.
Alright, let's just do it.
Your mind swells as it subsumes everything the tadpole has to offer. Everything it was and everything it was destined to be.
It took me about 10 minutes to realize it, but this gave me an illithid power to use, so I was able to choose one area of my mind to evolve. There were some interesting options, but I went for a passive as I didn't really want more moves that take up actions. I chose Favorable Beginnings, which grants your first attack or ability against each target a bonus.
What the hell?
At the start of the game, I thought, I'll be healed from the brain parasite probably early on, and the story will go from there. Who knows what will happen? It turns out what happens is you begin inviting additional parasites into your brain. Hello, terrifying toothy worm. Yes, feel free to burrow right on in there, no worries. I used the key I'd taken from Gut's body to head into this defiled temple, where I snuck up on and fairly easily took out this big girl. At some point, I noticed that Shadowheart had a disguise self spell, which she could use to turn into a gnome. So when I found this crevice that I couldn't fit into, I tried something. Sure enough, a gnomey Shadowheart could fit where a full-sized Shadowheart couldn't. Through the hole, I stole some stuff, and Shadowheart whipped out her lockpicking expertise to get into this chest. In this impressive chamber, I did some rotating of these floor panels to get the moons in the right place, and a way down opened.
Does this take me to the Underdark?
Yes, indeed. Down here was the Selûnite outpost, from which I stole a bunch of crap.
What is that? What the hell?
That Minotaur just headbutted itself to death against the gate. Great stuff. It was rather impressive down here, but I resisted the urge to explore and headed back up to end some goblins. Through here I found the warg pens, and I'd heard whispers a certain druid was captive down here too. Sure enough, this child named 3 ran off to try and get help. And while I'm usually not in favor of whacking children with swords, I was already outnumbered in this fight, so I whacked this child with a sword.
Nice. Can you just one-hit this guy? Yep, you sure can.
I thought Shadowheart would just be a support healer type, but she just dealt 36 damage. What a unit. These wargs tried to break free from their cage. I whacked another child with a sword. This one was called 1, and Halson the bear druid was fighting alongside us, so things went fairly smoothly. This floating axe that Shadowheart summoned dealt the finishing blow.
We found the big fella.
You aided a bear without knowing if it would savage you. A true friend of nature. Or perhaps a lunatic.
Definitely a lunatic. This bloke is the first druid of the Emerald Grove, so he's quite powerful. And during his investigations, he determined that someone had been using a very powerful magic to modify the tadpoles so that they could exert control over the infected. He couldn't help healing us, but he had worked out where the tadpoles were coming from. Moonrise Towers, a factory for true souls with tadpoles in their heads. And so that was where we must go. But first, Chapter 8, Slapping some Dinguses dead. I invited Halson along for the fun. His big paws are quite useful, and he can climb ladders. This battle was kind of dicey actually, because we had crappy positioning emerging from the warg pens, and this eyeball thing refused to take any damage. Also, it kept calling additional reinforcements. I picked off those reinforcements fairly comfortably, but the eyeball itself was a tough nut to crack. I eventually realized it had resistance to everything except thunder, so I was searching Gale's bag for a scroll that did thunder damage when Big Bad Bear finally landed another massive 1 damage hit, and the true main boss of Baldur's Gate 3 was defeated.
Okay, finally.
After 2 short rests to top up my health, I engaged Night Warden Minthara, second of the Goblin bosses.
Come on, big bear boy. Oh, absolutely cleaned up.
This silly nerd played the bongos, so some more reinforcements wandered over in response to his rhythmic call, but soon our target was dead and it was a straightforward cleanup from there.
Ooh, she's got some armor, man.
With a bonus to stealth, not bad. And she was a true soul, so I nabbed her parasite and shoved it into my noggin, unlocking another passive that allows successful attack rolls to be turned into a critical hit once per long rest. Speaking of, I was due a long rest. Volo was at camp, so we had a pleasant chat, and I had another dream featuring my dream lady friend, and I learned a lot. She revealed that any attempt to remove the tadpole in my head would kill me because it's wrapped in magic. Magic controlled by the Absolute. She said when the order is given, all these true souls will instantly be turned into mind flayers. But thanks to her protection, I would not. She also revealed that she too has a parasite, and she too wishes to be free of it. And I was her only hope because I can go where she cannot. And the power she was using to protect me, she stole from someone, and they wanted it back. So she was in this weird dreamscape fighting them off, I guess. Whew, well, that was a lot. I was intrigued. This game has a cool story. Also, you get to slap lots of dinguses. I took on Draw Ragslin and his goons next. Big Draw was the final goblin boss, and he was actually level 5, so he was a bit chunkier with 97 health.
Well, the big fella's angry.
He unleashed his rage on Lae'zel to good effect. Floydson caused a ruckus in the back lines, Shadowheart popped a heal on Lae'zel, and Gale used a spell I just taught him from a scroll, Scorching Ray. It crit. Ooh. A fully rested Lae'zel can whip out a self-heal and a couple of big swings in a single turn, so that was juicy. But Big Draw Ragslin had another turn in him, and he downed the fighter in 2 rage-filled swings.
This fight is hard.
Fortunately, with some bear slaps and another Scorching Ray, he went down.
Bro, Gale's a beast, man.
It was just a matter of cleaning up the little goobers from there.
You actually did it! The leader's dead! Praise Sylvanas.
Praise Sylvanas.
With all 3 goblin bosses dead, the goblin forces would be in disarray. Goal achieved. Halson headed back to the grove and I promised to meet him there.
Yes, my subjects. Bow before me in my palace of blood and bone.
Up here was an enormous pile of treasure, including some gloves that give you a melee bonus when 2 or more enemies are nearby, and boots that grant extra movement speed when dashing. I had another tadpole from Draw Ragslin to use. This one unlocked a passive that allows me to charm enemies that attack me, which prevents them from attacking me again until their next turn.
The feast's begun.
Yes, boys. Yes.
I'd been keeping these guys in reserve if any of those boss fights had proven too hard, but now I decided it was time. Mainly because I wanted to kill the ogres and see what loot they had. These spiders down here somehow got involved, so I guess it's just as well I summoned these big boys to help me out. Although things got a bit silly when it was a showdown of spiders and ogres staring at each other from either side of this iron gate. Eventually Choc went absolute beast mode.
He just absolutely destroyed that. That was huge.
Once we successfully sprayed the spiders to death, our deal was at an end, and Lump wondered if I perhaps had a spicier follow-up deal. I attacked him, again because I wanted Lump's loot.
Oh gosh, they're all here. This could be very dicey.
This is what you call terrible positioning. I used Lae'zel's trip arrow to try and knock one of the ogres prone, as a little crowd control would give my two cornered gooses a better chance at survival, but Big Lump had a successful saving throw, and then I missed. I jumped Gale away, and he suffered a critical opportunity attack for turning his back, but at least he was now out of melee range. And fortunately for me, the silly ogres split targets. Lump ran down the stairs to slap Shadowheart, and Fank decided he wanted to slap Lae'zel, and then shove Floydson.
What the heck? He's a genius.
Shove tactics are highly respectable, but they really should have just focused targets and I would have been in all sorts. Gale was completely tapped for spell charges, so I resorted to using scrolls from my bags. These are one use only, but very handy for this exact situation. Lae'zel managed to knock Choc prone, so I had some successful CC going my way, but then they disappeared into thin air. Just as the fight was turning in my favor too. No ogre loot for me, I guess. Chapter 9. Beautiful young woman helps wife and husband reunite. It's truly a love story for the ages, but before witnessing it, I had to get free of the shattered sanctum, and there were just a few enemies waiting for me when I emerged.
Yeah, I need a load.
I vowed to come back when I was higher level though, as I was keen to slaughter all them goblins. After a long sleep featuring some random tension between the ladies, I fed Gale a third delicious item, and he finally explained the details of his strange situation. Basically, he was such a gifted wizard that he caught the goddess of magic Mystra's attention, and they became lovers.
Are you telling me you made love to a goddess?
Oh yes.
Oh yes.
Long story short, a lord in a flying tower tried to usurp Mystra, and the weave was shattered. Mystra restored it, but one shard of it was beyond her reach. Gale, trying to impress his love, decided to track down and return that missing shard. He found it, but it was a little unstable, and he somehow absorbed it into himself. And that's why he now needed to absorb magic to appease it, because if it becomes more unstable, he might explode. I said, fair enough. Hopefully he doesn't explode at an inconvenient time. Everyone at the Grove was pleased with my goblin killing efforts, and the refugees were preparing themselves for their trip to Baldur's Gate. I sold all my crap to the vendors and caught up with Halsin, who was quite angry at Korgo for the silly willy she got up to as acting first druid in his absence. I was granted access to this secret chamber where I collected some loot as reward for my efforts. Also, I noticed there was a mind flayer parasite specimen that Halsin had been researching here, so I yoinked it and shoved it into Gale's brain this time, unlocking him the favorable beginnings passive. I then headed south, back to the wetlands from earlier, which is where a hag supposedly lives. I encountered some wood woads and mud mephits. The ancient mud mephits summoned young ones, and when I killed the ancients, they, plus their summons, spontaneously exploded mud everywhere, dealing damage to the whole party. The wood woads dropped entangling vines everywhere, and mud explosions were going off willy-nilly, so we were looking worse for wear at the end of it all, but it was nothing a short rest couldn't heal up. I took my time exploring the wetlands, and I thought them quite pretty. I had a chat with some sheep. I walked over another shrapnel explodey trap, and I soon came upon the dead bodies of those brothers from earlier, the two that had gone off to hunt down the hag. It seems the hunters became the hunted. Also, green leaves, shallow water.
Green leaves, shallow water. Green leaves, shallow water.
I somehow ended up in a fight with this addled frog, and it popped off.
What the heck? What a beast.
The little froggy also cast a spell called Mirror Image, which made him very hard to target until all the mirror images were dispelled. So my whole party was unleashing air swings for a while before we finally finished it off. And when we did, Floydson was hit with a confusion spell. I guess the frog's addlement was contagious, and he whacked Shadowheart in his confusion. Soon enough, he had his wits back, but as you can see from his sickly stance here, he was diseased. That trap earlier had caused him to bleed, and I guess he got infected, and he simply wasn't rolling the saving throw he needed to get healthy. So I resorted to having a long sleep to get him back in shape. There was a party going on at camp, celebrating the defeat of the Goblins. It was a riot. For now though, hag hunting. I found this fancy looking establishment, and just nearby this bloke, who claimed to be a monster hunter. He warned me the fancy establishment might look like a tea house, but it is in fact the hag's lair. He also said he was hunting a certain vampire named Asterion. He claimed his people were attacked by a vampire in the night, and Asterion was to blame. I admitted I knew Asterion, but I didn't rat him out as I wanted to hear his side of the story first. And into the quote-unquote tea house house we went. Inside Ethel the hag was force-feeding Mayrina, those dead brothers' sister, a massive pie. I spoiled the fun by informing Mayrina that this lady she was dealing with had killed both her brothers.
Enough, away with you. Blessed silence at last. Some time in the cage should do her good. And you'll regret sticking your nose in my business.
Ooh, she's gonna make herself very beautiful, I think. Yes, very beautiful indeed.
The illusion over the land was dispelled too, and a swamp was revealed, along with some of the hag's fey friends. I thought it was going to be an easy fight, but they kicked Floydson all over the place. Meanwhile, the hag disappeared behind the fireplace. Fortunately, the remaining redcaps proved straightforward to defeat, and it was then time to chase the hag behind the fireplace and down these creepy stairs into this overgrown tunnel.
Why's the map red?
In here was a museum of the hag's victims. Take Callum, who didn't want his beauty to fade. So the hag had his skull chilling, looking at a mirror. Or this elf who wished never to lay eyes on her family again. And now that her eyes weren't in her head anymore, wish granted. Or the dwarf who wanted the deadly disease ruining his body to be halted. And it was, because he was now stone. I discovered I had basilisk oil, which removes petrification, so I threw some at him. He was not appreciative, and immediately died of that terrible disease I mentioned.
I don't want to die!
Sorry, bro. That's my bad. But I will take some loot.
This fella Lauren wanted to see the future, and now it was all he could see. But apparently just the very worst of the future, because he didn't seem to be having a very good time of it. I headed through this gnarly door that wasn't actually a door at all. It was some dude who tried to steal from the hag who had been entombed in roots. And on the other side, I found some people the hag had enchanted to fight for her against their will. It was a fairly unremarkable fight, but at the end of it, Gale randomly leveled up to level 5, though the other 3 noobs in my party did not. I have no idea how Gale got ahead, but I respect it.
He's got no shoes on. Level 3 spell. 2 level 3 slots. Nice. Animate dead. Fireball. Oh, level 3 spells are nuts.
I have no idea why old mate had his stinky toes out, but it was indeed a joy to look through all the spicy level 3 spells. I chose Fireball, which is a big damage AoE, and Bestow Curse, which I kind of regret choosing as I think there were better options. Anyway, I leapt this gap and found an area covered in noxious fumes, and some traps. So after an absolute stinker attempting to navigate this cursed place...
let's have a long rest. Oh, we're in a danger zone, so we can't have a long rest.
I learned what the red on the map means. This area is a dungeon instance of sorts in which you can't fast travel or long sleep. I reloaded and headed back up to long sleep so I'd have all my spells and abilities ready for the encounter with the hag. This trip back to camp was my first opportunity to speak to Asterion about the monster hunter that was hunting him, and he revealed a vampire lord named Cazador, the vampire that turned him into a vampire spawn 200 years ago, must be looking to get him back. Apparently this Cazador is no joke.
He could walk into our camp tonight and kill you with his bare hands. And you'd be lucky if death was the worst thing that happened to you.
So I guess Astarion's extremely powerful tormentor was another problem to add to the rather long list of problems plaguing my camp. I decided to back my pasty friend by killing the vampire hunter. It wasn't exactly a fair fight, but I somehow took a fair bit of damage, even with missile snaring and reflection on my side. I was pleased to claim his crossbow, which I gave to Floydson. This fight also got my other 3 party members to level 5. This was a huge level to reach for Floydson and Lae'zel, as they both gained extra attacks. Shadowheart earned her level 3 spells, and 2 level 3 spell slots to use per long rest. I had her memorize a level 3 healing and support spell. After a short rest, back into the hag's lair we descended. This time I was much more careful, with some choice jumping and pathing, ensuring my party only suffered minor damage from the fumes, which I healed up with potions. Down here I found Mayrina in her cage, which was hanging over a gaping chasm. Not a great predicament for the young lady.
You want the girl so bad. Fine.
That cage won't last.
So Auntie Ethel had summoned 5 images of herself, which had full capacity to unleash havoc, but they fortunately were dispelled immediately upon taking damage. And she'd set Mayrina's cage on fire, so I was working with time pressure. Gotta kill the hag before the cage burns and Mayrina falls to her death. Once Gale's turn came around, I realized magic missiles were absolutely perfect for this fight, as you can aim each missile at different targets, and they have a 100% hit chance. In a single turn, he dispelled 2 hag clones and identified the real hag for me. Gale MVP. We began ganging up on the real Ethel, both stunning her and knocking her prone, elite double crowd control shenanigans, which was overkill, and apparently I was impressed by Lae'zel's hefty axe swings.
What a beast.
But I'd let too much time pass. Mayrina's cage had burned down to 7 health, and was likely to fall after one more round of turns. Despairing I wouldn't be able to save her in time, I decided to try and pull her out of the cage using Water Whip's pull maneuver.
I think this is what I have to do. I might kill her though.
So I reloaded that one because I want to save that girl. I got Gale in position with Mistral's Step and took out 4 clones with 1 magic missile cast. And I approached the fight in a similar way to last time, except this time...
Oh no. Oh no.
But I took the clones out no worries, and the real Ethel emerged from invisibility right over here like a dingus, so we slapped her silly, and saved young Mayrina in time.
We did it. My level 5 shenanigans are strong.
Ethel the Hag had promised to resurrect Mayrina's husband Connor in exchange for their as yet unborn child, and this poor woman was willing to go through with that deal, so desperate was she. Apparently Ethel had promised the child would get a good life, but clearly that was a lie. Anyway, Big Floydson and co to the rescue.
Oh yeah, she's got some loot. Holy dooly, she's got some loot.
Lots of gold, some level 4 spell scrolls, and a good necklace that increases saving throws against death. Through this door was Ethel's workshop, where I found a strange wand called the Bitter Divorce, and the very nice Staff of Crones, which gives the bearer 1 cast of Ray of Sickness per short rest. I of course gave this to Big Gale.
That is a sick item. And it looks pretty cool too.
Down the back here was this mushroom circle, which teleported me outside, where I found Mayrina weeping by the coffin of her late husband. I showed her the wand I'd found, and...
I mean, clearly it's not a good wand, but let's just do it. See what happens. Oh gosh.
What? What's happening? Why is he still dead?
Oh Lord.
Connor!
Whoever held the hag's wand was Zombie Connor's master, so I could have kept it and had an undead slave, but I am a romantic at heart, so I gave it to Mayrina, and she vowed to take him to Baldur's Gate and search for some kind of cure. I thought that a rather optimistic plan, but who am I to get in the way of young love? I sincerely hope I run into these two when I get to Baldur's Gate. Chapter 10, a daring rescue, buying a slave for a bargain, and Goblin Genocide.
Right.
After the hugely successful marriage counselling I provided to Mayrina and Connor, it was time to scour the rest of this Act 1 area. First, I found this path I'd missed in the Emerald Grove. It led to this cliffy area where I found some harpies that I'd severely out-leveled.
Oh yeah, ready? Yes. That was sick.
I had a ride on the lift I'd evicted Tuffet from ages ago, so his valiant effort to move 2 meters was well worth it after all. And with that, as far as I could tell, the entire bottom half of the map was explored. So I headed back up north to where all the hyenas and gnoll shenanigans happened earlier. I found this fiery lady and immediately recognized her as the devil Will had been hunting in hell. I told her he was after her.
Karlak, I met someone named Will who was hunting you. He said you were a devil.
Now that we're all pals, how would you feel about
Along with some elite twitching, she insisted Will was wrong about her, and she'd prove it to him if she just had a chance to speak with him. Apparently she had been enslaved by the archdevil Zariel, and now that she was finally free, Zariel was sending all manner of goons to chase her down, including Will. I was amazed to discover she was a playable character, a barbarian, but I was pretty happy with my party, so I sent her back to camp. I wandered into a mess at this estate that had been raided by drow, and I unleashed my extremely muscly leg to knock down these enormous doors so we could rescue those trapped inside. I spent a rather long time stealing copious amounts of food first, gotta get them snacks for long rests, but then the daring rescue commenced. I saved this shaggy fella with another display of hulkish strength, and Counselor Floric from behind this collapsed door. Once we'd safely emerged, she informed us the Grand Duke Older Ravengard had been taken by the drow, somewhere west. I was headed that way anyway, so I agreed to help rescue him. I then pilfered even more food from the burning house.
I'm not a monster.
I was ready to run you through. My mistake, friend.
Did you kill the goblin in the stable?
Yes. It was screaming, waving around its metal. I made him stop screaming.
This building had a bunch of boxes blocking the door, so I threw them out of the way, and inside was this lurker, who I managed to calm down before he unleashed a fireball in my face. I headed down this hatch and found myself in the Zentarum hideout.
What's your business down here?
Answer honestly and maybe we'll kill you clean.
I assured this kind lady I just wanted to trade, and so I was allowed to wander into their hideout. I poked around a little, had another chat with the feisty lady, during which she asked me to track down a shipment that had gone missing, and when I wandered past these big wolfy boys, I discovered Shadowheart is very afraid of wolves.
They're ravenous predators with fangs like daggers.
No judgment here. I'm afraid of the bandicoots in my backyard.
You need to buy me.
That was enough for me. I immediately bought him for 600 gold.
He's all yours. Don't forget to feed him. He balls something proper.
This Oscar fella I just bought is a painter, and he promised to reward me once he made it to Baldur's Gate. Fair enough, see you there, slave. I headed back east and found these gnolls causing a ruckus at the entrance to this cave, but before engaging I decided to have a long rest. While at camp, Will and Karlach had it out, and after some Parasite Connect division, we all saw that Karlach was indeed a victim of the Blood War, not an agent of it. And so Will begrudgingly gave up his hunt.
You really are no devil, are you? I've been deceived.
And in the morning, Shadowheart had more that she wanted to share. She confided her dream was to become a Dark Justiciar, the Night Singer's sword, Shah's implement to restore perfect, endless darkness. To that I said, it's good to have wholesome dreams to work towards. I sneakily positioned my party and engaged the gnolls. Floydson began cleaning up some big doggies, Lae'zel knocked down and battered the gnoll warlord Flind, and we learned that she was a true soul. Great news, another parasite to invite into my brain. I had to win the fight first though, which proved fairly straightforward, though Big Flind did get off one impressive flail strike. In defeating these gnolls, I rescued the nerds with the shipment I was looking for. And while I was tempted to simply steal the shipment, I opted to let them head off to complete their delivery. And after exploring the cave, there was an incident.
Oh my lord.
Across the bridge, I snuck into the top level of this toll house, in which I cleaned up a group that had been hunting Karlach. Downstairs was a basement, featuring a secret room with a most glorious opening mechanism. You had to get 2 dinguses to sit in the chairs and the door opened. Lovely stuff. It was trapped with vents of noxious gas, but you can just throw objects onto the vents to stop the gas coming out. And with that, I was free to pilfer all the goodies. The best of what I found were paladin gloves, I believe, but I do not have a paladin in my party, so my favorite part was definitely the double butt activated door. I returned to the Zentarum hideout, and Zaris was pleased with my efforts securing the shipment. She also admitted she intended on blowing up her entire hideout because she didn't want the Flaming Fist to blame the Zentarum for the arson of the Duke's estate nearby. And honestly, blowing up everything sounds like a great solution. I also received Harold. Harold is quite a good crossbow. Now that I was friends with the Zentarum, their superior trading options became available to me. So I bought a ring that gives you a buff when you heal, and some improved chain armor for Lae'zel. And even though, as I said, I was now friends with the Zentarum, I decided to kill a bunch of them in the back of the cave here because I wanted to see what loot they had. It's fine, I'm sure Zaris won't notice. Shadowheart must have been hating life during this fight though, because we fought like 4 wolves. Things took a chaotic turn when this dude shot a fire arrow, and this deck collapsed with both Shadowheart and Gale on it. In fact, Shadowheart kinda got stuck in there. But ultimately, this fight was a bunch of level 4s being smashed by my level 5 party. I then looted the rooms they'd been guarding and found my first pink item.
Ooh.
It made the wearer's summoned creature resistant to all damage except psychic, so these were definitely extremely good summoner gloves. I considered having Shadowheart wear these because she occasionally summons giant floating weapons, but look at the visual effect these cause. It's very dramatic. So I took the gloves off because they made me feel like I was tripping. And in the other room, then it was time for another long rest.
Hellsfire. She's coming.
I'm Will's patron, the fount of his power. My pet's been unruly, and his leash needs a yank.
Warlocks like Will have demonic patrons that gift them their magic, and Will had disobeyed his patron by refusing to hunt Karlach, so here she was to get him in trouble, and the punishment...
Will burns in the fires of Avernus. The lightning storms of Dis strike his flesh. His soul passes through each layer of the hells, gaining their essence and their torment.
What the heck? Made him horny.
Somehow, even after this punishment, Will swore to me that making a pact with Mazora was his proudest deed, and asked me to trust him on that. Yet another intriguing storyline from one of my camp members, and an excellent pair of horns, no doubt. I remembered I'd received a tadpole from that gnoll, so I used it to unlock that same favorable beginnings passive for Lae'zel, and I witnessed Astarion looking at himself in the mirror, even though he's a vampire and cannot see himself in the mirror. You gotta respect the effort, though. In the morning, yet more character storyline development. It's been an absolute surge of story recently. This time, Shadowheart again. This cutscene showed a young Shadowheart, lost in the wilderness, rescued by weirdo disciples of Shah who erased her memory and took her in.
Something sparks in your memory about Selûnite rites of passage. You heard once about how they would send their children out into the wilds to navigate their way home.
If what my handsome moustache remembers is true, Shadowheart was a part of the Selûnite religion, but she has no memory of anything before she was snapped up by the Shah religion. And these two religions are at complete odds, so Shadowheart is a creature of contradictions. To that I said, I too am a man of mysterious contradictions. I live right near some of the best beaches in the world, in the city that has probably the best climate in Australia, and yet I almost never swim in the ocean. Any writers for Larian watching, feel free to nab that as a backstory for a character in your next game. And at last, the finale, the destruction of all those silly goblins I'd left behind. I approached from the bridge, and really I missed an opportunity to shove this bloke off. I engaged the rabble deeper in the camp, and as you can see that attracted quite a few enemies, but many of them were level 1 idiots with like 9 health, and they all funneled towards me on the bridge, where I sat shooting at them. It worked a treat. We whittled down their forces from a distance, and even this big fella only just made it to us before keeling over. Eventually I pushed in and took out the entire lower area, before heading up and deleting some snoozers. And with that, the entire Goblin camp was cleared. Very satisfying. And so ends chapter 10 of this adventure. Chapter 11 will be the story of the mysterious Underdark. So if you'd like a 50 hours of Baldur's Gate 3 video, hit like, drop a comment, let me know. Check out 200 Days of Raft, in which I save the post-apocalyptic ocean world from a silly goose named Olaf.